Picture this: April 1945. American soldiers stand at the entrance of an abandoned salt mine, 2,100 feet beneath the Earth's surface. What they're about to discover will shock the world and raise questions that remain unanswered 80 years later. Inside that mine, stacked against ancient walls, sit more than 7,000 bags of gold bars. Hundreds of bags filled with jewelry ripped from the fingers of the dead. Boxes overflowing with dental gold melted down from the mouths of murdered victims. This is the story of the greatest robbery in human history. A story of greed, genocide, and gold that disappeared into the shadows, some of it still hidden today. You've never heard it told like this before. Austria, the 12th of March 1938, the first strike. Let me take you back to a cold morning in Vienna. German troops had just marched into Austria hours earlier. While the world watched the military parade, something far more sinister was unfolding behind closed doors. A man named Wilhelm Kepler, businessman and early Hitler loyalist, walked into the Austrian Central Bank accompanied by 2 armed Nazi commandos. They weren't there to make a deposit. Within hours, 78 tons of Austrian gold reserves were seized and loaded onto trains bound for Berlin. But that wasn't enough. The Nazis forced Vienna's wealthy Jewish community to surrender an additional 14.3 tons of private gold. Imagine being ordered to hand over your family's heirlooms, your wedding rings, your life savings at gunpoint. Hjalmar Schacht, president of the Reichsbank, personally traveled to Vienna to oversee the operation. In a chilling ceremony at the central bank headquarters, he led the Austrian staff in a pledge of allegiance to Adolf Hitler. The message was clear. This wasn't just conquest. This was total domination. Why gold? The economic desperation behind the theft. You might wonder, why did the Nazis care so much about gold? Here's the truth. By 1938, Germany was broke. The Treaty of Versailles had crippled the economy, and Hitler's massive rearmament programs had drained every last pfennig from the treasury. The Reichsbank's gold reserves were nearly empty. Germany couldn't buy weapons, raw materials, or machinery from neutral countries without foreign currency, and they had none. Then came the Austrian gold. It was a lifeline. Emil Pohl, vice president of the Reichsbank, later wrote in a chilling memo dated the 3rd of October 1938. The rapid implementation of rearmament was only possible because of the use of available gold, foreign exchange from the former Reich, and the immediate recovery of Austrian gold, foreign raw material, and valuable securities reserves. Translation: without that stolen gold, Hitler's war machine would have collapsed before it even began. The blueprint. Looting Europe's central banks Austria was just the beginning. The pattern was set, and it would be repeated across Europe with ruthless efficiency. As Nazi forces swept through Czechoslovakia, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France, they followed the same playbook. Wehrmacht troops would secure the city, and within hours, Nazi financial experts would arrive at the central bank to seize every ounce of gold. By the end of the war, the Nazis had captured approximately $600 million worth of gold from European central banks, an amount that would be worth $19 billion today. This wasn't random theft. This was systematic, industrial-scale robbery orchestrated at the highest levels of the Nazi regime. But there was another source of gold, one far more horrifying, one that would reveal the true depths of Nazi evil, the system of horror. What I'm about to tell you is deeply disturbing, but it's essential that you know it, because this is the part of the story that often gets forgotten in all the treasure hunt excitement. On the 23rd of September 1940, SS Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler issued a directive to SS doctors: collect gold teeth from the mouths of concentration camp victims. This wasn't an isolated 1940 friends order. It was policy. In Auschwitz alone, every crematorium yielded an average of 18 pounds of gold per day extracted from victims' mouths. Think about that number, 18 pounds, every single day. By early 1944, Members of the resistance movement within Auschwitz documented that the SS collected between 10 to 12 kilograms of gold per month from victims' teeth. In June 1944, a secret note smuggled out of the camp reported that 40 kilograms of gold and white metal had been collected in a single month. Throughout the war, Auschwitz alone yielded approximately 6,000 kilograms of dental gold, the complete inventory of death. But dental gold was just one piece of the puzzle. The Nazis stripped everything of value from their victims before and after their murders. Wedding rings, jewelry, gold coins, diamonds, watches, even eyeglass frames. All of it was collected, catalogued, and sent to processing centers, where it was roughly melted down in makeshift forges. The German company Degussa later admitted decades after the war that it had refined and melted down gold for the Nazis, including gold taken from concentration camp victims. They turned objects with stories, with histories, with souls attached to them into anonymous bars of metal. This gold, blood-stained, cursed, born of genocide, was then mixed with the monetary gold stolen from central banks and used to finance the Nazi war machine. A witness account. Let me share something with you that a survivor later recalled. A woman who worked in the Canada warehouse at Auschwitz, where victims' belongings were sorted, described mountains of suitcases, each carefully labeled with names and addresses by people who believed they were going to be resettled. She said, "We found wedding rings with inscriptions, photographs of children tucked into wallets, love letters folded into coat pockets, and we were ordered to throw it all into the furnace except the gold. The gold was always saved. That's who we're for-ness." Really talking about when we talk about Nazi gold. Not bars in a vault. People, families, lives. The laundering machine. Here's a question I want you to consider. How did the Nazis turn stolen gold into usable currency? You can't just walk into Portugal or Spain with looted Belgian gold and expect them to accept it. Someone had to clean it first. Someone had to ask no questions. That someone was Switzerland. Between 1939 and 1945, the Swiss National Bank purchased approximately 1.6 billion Swiss francs worth of gold from the German Reichsbank. In 1998, the Swiss Bergier Commission established to investigate Switzerland's wartime role estimated that the Swiss National Bank had received $440 million in Nazi gold, equivalent to $8.5 billion today. More than half of it was confirmed to be looted. How the system worked. Let me explain how this worked, because it's as ingenious as it is morally bankrupt. The Nazis needed to buy tungsten from Portugal. Portugal wanted escudos. Germany didn't have escudos. So here's what they did. Germany deposited looted gold at the Swiss National Bank in exchange for Swiss francs. Swiss banks then used those francs to buy escudos from the Portuguese National Bank. Portugal exchanged the francs back at the Swiss National Bank for Swiss gold. At the end of this elaborate shell game, Swiss gold flowed out, while looted Nazi gold piled up in Swiss vaults. The Swiss called these triangular transactions. Between the fall of 1941 and the end of 1942, up to 551 million Swiss francs in Nazi gold poured into the National Bank through these transactions. Did they know? This is the question that haunted Switzerland for decades. Did they know the gold was stolen? Did they know it came from murdered victims? The answer, according to the Bergier Commission, is unequivocal. Yes, they knew. The Swiss National Bank's governing board knew at an early point that the gold was being looted from occupied countries. Emil Pohl, the Reichsbank vice president who coordinated these transactions, was later found guilty during the Wilhelmstrasse war crimes trial of being privy to the transfer of gold from Nazi concentration camps. The Swiss weren't just passive recipients. They were active participants in history's greatest robbery. The tip led me take you to Germany. April 1945. The Third Reich is collapsing. Berlin is under siege. Millions of refugees are fleeing westward ahead of the Soviet advance. In the small town of Merkers two German women approach American soldiers with an extraordinary claim. There's a disused salt mine nearby, and it contains something unbelievable. The information reaches Lieutenant Colonel William A. Russell of the 90th Infantry Division. He decides to investigate. The frantic evacuation. What Russell didn't know yet was that in February 1945, Allied bombing had nearly destroyed the Reichsbank building in Berlin, including its currency presses. Nazi officials immediately decided to evacuate Germany's gold reserves, worth approximately $238 million, to a safer location 200 miles southwest of Berlin. They chose Murkers. Throughout February and March 1945, as Berlin's fall became inevitable, convoy after convoy arrived at the mine. The cargo included gold and silver bars, foreign currencies bundled in thousands of bags, jewelry confiscated from Jews, dental gold, diamonds, coins, and 1/4 of the major holdings of 14 principal Prussian state museums. As American forces closed in, Reichsbank officials made frantic efforts to remove as much as possible. On April 2, they loaded about 200 million Reichsmarks and 50 packages of foreign currency onto trucks destined for Magdeburg. Another railway car was loaded, but the bridge it needed to cross was blown up by approaching American troops, forcing the train back to Murkers. It was too late. The Americans were already there. Descending into history. On the 7th of April 1945, Lieutenant Colonel Russell, along with other officers and Signal Corps photographers, entered the mine. They took the elevator down, 2,100 feet beneath the surface. Imagine that descent. The darkness, the cold, the uncertainty of what they'd find. In the main haulage way, they found 550 bags of Reichsmarks stacked against the walls. But the real treasure lay behind a 3-foot thick brick wall with a massive bank-type steel safe door, complete with combination lock and timing mechanism. They couldn't crack the code, so they blasted through with half a stick of dynamite. What they found: the vault measured approximately 75 feet wide by 150 feet long, with a 2-foot high ceiling. What was inside defied imagination. More than 7,000 bags of gold bars and coins, 55 boxes of crated gold bullion, hundreds of bags of gold items, over 1,300 bags of gold, Reichsmarks, British gold pounds, and French gold francs, 711 bags of American $20 gold pieces, hundreds of bags of gold and silver coins, hundreds of bags of foreign currency, more than 2,000 bags and 1,300 boxes of Reichsmarks, boxes of silver plate and platinum bars, 400 tons of artworks. When General Dwight D. Eisenhower visited the mine later that month, even he, a man who had seen the worst of war, was taken aback. In his memoirs, Eisenhower wrote, "Crammed into suitcases and trunks and other containers was a great amount of gold and silver plate and ornament, obviously looted from private dwellings throughout Europe. All the articles had been flattened by hammer blows, obviously to save storage space, and then merely thrown into the receptacle, apparently pending an opportunity to melt them down into gold or silver bars. The total value recovered from Murkers, over $520 million. The Nazi Gold Train. Now let me tell you about the myths, because they're almost as interesting as the truth. The most famous legend? The Nazi Gold Train. According to the story, in the spring of 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, an armored train loaded with 300 tons of gold, jewels, and artworks departed the city and vanished somewhere in the Sudetian mountains. Witnesses claimed the train was sealed in hidden tunnels by retreating Nazis as part of the unfinished Project Riese near Change Castle. On board was supposedly enough treasure to make whoever found it the richest person on Earth. In August 2015, two treasure hunters in Poland, Piotr Koper and Andreas Richter, announced they had found radar evidence of the train. The news went viral. Media from around the world descended on the site. The Polish government got involved. Excavations were approved, and you know what they found? Nothing. According to historians, there's no credible evidence the train ever existed. Yet the legend persists. Why? Because people want to believe. The Amber Room, the eighth wonder lost. Then there's the Amber Room, often called the eighth wonder of the world. Crafted in the Quistons, 18th century, from amber panels backed with gold leaf. The room was a masterpiece that adorned the Catherine Palace near Leningrad. When German troops arrived in September 1941, they found Russian curators had attempted to hide it with wallpaper. The ruse failed. Within 36 hours, the entire room had been dismantled, packed, and shipped by train to Königsberg, now Kaliningrad. Near the end of August 1944, Königsberg was bombed extensively by the Soviets. Witnesses reported seeing the Amber Room panels in the basement of Königsberg Castle shortly before the bombing. After that, silence. The room vanished. In 2008, treasure hunters in Germany claimed they had found it in an underground cavern near Deutschneudorf. The mayor stated he was well over 90% sure they had found it. Excavations followed. Media cameras rolled. Once again, nothing. To this day, the Amber Room remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Why do we believe? Here's what I find fascinating. Why do these legends endure when evidence is so thin? Part of it is human nature. We love mysteries. We love treasure hunts. We love the idea that somewhere, buried deep underground, lies a fortune waiting to be discovered. But there's something darker at play too. These legends allow us to focus on adventure stories rather than confronting the horrifying truth of where much of that gold came from, the bodies of murdered innocents. The myths are easier to digest than the reality. The long road to restitution. So what happened to all the gold recovered at Murkers and elsewhere? During the summer of 1945, the currencies were returned to various countries. The process of restituting the artworks began shortly after. In 1946, a commission called the Tripartite Commission for the Restitution of Monetary Gold was established to distribute stolen gold and return it to rightful owners. But here's the problem. Cold War politics got in the way. Countries behind the Iron Curtain were excluded from restitution. Bureaucratic red tape slowed everything down. Victims and their families waited, and waited, and waited. The last gold wasn't restituted until 1996, more than 50 years after the war ended. The victim gold problem. The most contentious issue remained. What about the non-monetary gold? The jewelry, wedding rings, and dental gold stolen from Holocaust victims? Much of this victim gold had been melted down and mixed with monetary gold from central banks, making it nearly impossible to separate and identify. The question of how much restitution should be made to victims of Nazi persecution and their heirs sparked intense, often bitter debate. It wasn't until 1997 to 98 that around 15 countries agreed to relinquish their claims to shares still held by the Tripartite Gold Commission and donate it as compensation for victims of Nazi persecution. This share amounted to 5.5 metric tons of gold, 5.5 tons. Out of thousands, a fraction, a token, nowhere near enough. Switzerland's delayed admission. In May 1946, Switzerland signed the Washington Agreement, agreeing to pay 250 million francs in exchange for dropping all claims related to Switzerland's role in Nazi gold transactions. For decades, Switzerland maintained it had acted honorably, that it had no choice, that neutrality required accepting gold from all sides. Then, in the 1,990 seconds, pressure mounted. Declassified documents revealed the full extent of Swiss cooperation with the Nazis. The Bergier Commission was established, and finally, Switzerland admitted what many had suspected all along. They knew, and they profited. So here we are, 80 years later, and I want you to think about something. The Nazis stole approximately $600 million in monetary gold, $19 billion in today's money from the central banks of Europe. They murdered millions and extracted gold from the mouths of the dead. They found willing accomplices in neutral nations who asked no questions as long as the gold kept flowing. Much of that gold was recovered at Merkers and other locations. Much of it was returned, though the process took decades. But here's what keeps me up at night. How much is still out there? Think about it. In the final days of the war, as the Reich collapsed, thousands of Nazi officers disappeared. Many fled to South America with new identities. SS officers, Gestapo agents, collaborators. They didn't flee empty-handed. What did they take with them? Where did they hide it? And who has it now? The uncomfortable math. Here's what we know for certain. The accounting doesn't add up. Witnesses reported trainloads of gold departing from Berlin, Breslau, and Munich in the war's final weeks. Trainloads that never arrived at documented destinations. Bank records from Switzerland, Argentina, and Portugal show deposits that can't be fully traced. And every few years, someone somewhere finds a cache. Gold coins hidden in walls. Jewelry buried in forests. Artifacts stashed in forgotten bank vaults. If we're still finding it now, 80 years later, what else is out there? The questions I'm leaving you with, I'm not going to tie this up in a neat bow. Because the truth is, this story isn't over. So I want to hear from you. Not whether you think the gold train exists, that's a distraction. I want to know what you think about the real questions. First question. If Nazi gold is discovered today, whether in a Polish forest or a numbered Swiss bank account, who does it belong to? The descendants of victims? The countries it was stolen from? The person who found it? Second question. Should countries like Switzerland be forced to open all their wartime banking records even now, 80 years later? Or is it time to let sleeping dogs lie? Third question. What about the banks and corporations that profited from blood gold? Switzerland paid 250 million francs in 1946 and called it even. Is that justice? Or is it just the cost of doing business? And here's the big one. If the gold taken from Mater, Holocaust victims, was melted down and mixed with monetary gold, making it impossible to identify, does that absolve anyone? Or does it make everyone who touched it complicit? The truth behind the treasure. Because here's what I need you to understand. Behind every ounce of Nazi gold is a human being who was robbed, brutalized, and murdered. Every wedding ring has a story. Every dental gold filling belonged to someone with a name, a family, a life that was stolen. Every bar of gold melted down from looted central banks represents a nation's wealth, stolen at gunpoint. The treasure hunt stories are exciting, the legends are thrilling, but they're also a distraction from the crime, a crime that, in many ways, is still ongoing. Your turn. So tell me, what do you think happened to the missing gold? Where do you think it is? More importantly, if it's found tomorrow, what should be done with it? Who has the moral right to it? And finally, how many family heirlooms sitting in safety? Deposit boxes? How many anonymous accounts in Swiss banks? How many museum pieces with murky provenance are actually stolen Nazi gold that was never recovered, never returned, never accounted for? The answers aren't in any history book, they're in the questions we're willing to ask and the conversations we're brave enough to have. Some of you will say I'm being too harsh. Some will say I'm not being harsh enough. Some will defend Switzerland. Others will condemn them. Good. That means you're thinking. That means you're engaging with history, not just consuming it. Because that's the point. The Nazi gold isn't just about treasure. It's about justice. It's about memory. It's about accountability. And 80 years later, we still haven't figured out the answers. So what do you think? I want to hear your opinion in the comments. Not just about where the gold is, but about what should happen if we find it. The conversation starts now.